My girlfriend and I were left in charge of running a restaurant when we were traveling as volunteers. This is a thing that you encounter often when you're backpacking. Pretty much all the hostels and tourism-related companies have volunteers running some aspect of it. Usually it's the customer-facing positions like waiters, greeters, and answering phones in English, if you're in a country with not many people who speak it. Working in a foreign country is illegal without a visa, so that's why they called us volunteers. We had been staying at the owner's hotel for about 2 weeks, but had plans of longer travel time while we explored the area, and while talking with the owner one morning, taking care of the place came up in conversation, and that's how it all started. The hotel itself was old, and the restaurant was made on the driveway of the place, by removing the parking spaces and building walls of metal slabs and a ceiling of the same material. It had a large window facing the sidewalk. The place ended up looking nice due to the many drapes and Arabic theme that it had. It looked like a nice outdoorsy area to have dinner, since it would only be open in the evening. The food tasted great, but the employees had some serious issues with the owner. He had yelled at several of them over trivial cooking mistakes. The owner, being such a perfectionist, would abuse his power, and eventually the main waitress quit, and then the kitchen assistants quit, leaving only the chef and 2 volunteer waiters, which were my girlfriend and myself. We never had any trouble with him, probably because we were foreigners. But in the end, we struck a deal where we would get paid, get free housing, and free food while we stayed there, because he had some other businesses to look after in other places. The hotel administrator would be overlooking our work in the restaurant. Being super broke, we agreed. But by accepting this deal, we also brought on some other responsibilities and couldn't say no when the owner asked us to hire new staff, which automatically made the staff think that we were managers of the place. It was an awkward situation, but we made it work for a couple of weeks. We started discovering just how strange this owner was as we talked to some of the older people on staff. They told me about the many people that looked for him to perform some type of healing. One time, an elderly man came searching for him and left a message to let him know that someone else in his family had gotten sick and that he wanted to speak with him as soon as possible. I asked him if the owner was a doctor, and the elderly man said yes, that he had cured many people from odd illnesses. The owner's story kept unfolding slowly as we discovered more and more about the restaurant. He would also make strange requests, like asking us to grab seeds from the storage area and plant them with precise instructions, just to grow lemongrass. He would ask us to ship him things from boxes he left behind, and would ask for pictures of the restaurant dining area for cleanliness and change of decorations. One of the weirdest ones was that we were supposed to grab the mannequin that was in the back, something he had picked up from a business that had closed down, and to dress it in some type of old clothing he had left behind. And I'm not joking. We were on Skype at the time, and he thought it was such a great idea until we chuckled and nervously agreed. He said we were to set the mannequin on one of the tables so that passerbys could see it through the window as an attention grabber. When the hotel administrator saw me carrying the thing, she couldn't believe it. Yet it didn't surprise her that the owner had asked us for such a thing. It was old and dirty and was put away from the hotel lobby because visitors would say that it made them feel uncomfortable. So it ended up in storage. We washed it, dressed it up, and set it by the window like he asked, and man, we got comments right away. In that aspect, I guess it worked a little bit. It was a topic of conversation, and people would even stop by to take photos of it. The owner had a real way with marketing, which gave sense to why he had so many businesses. Now, this was a candlelit, dim lighting type of place, just so you get an idea of how much a mannequin sitting down by the window would stand out. Everything ran smoothly for the following week, sales as normal, until we got a peculiar complaint one night. A middle-aged woman said that the mannequin made her feel very uncomfortable, and went as far as to say that it had been placed there in order to scare away people like her. What she meant, I had no idea. Customers can be like that sometimes. But right after the waiter told me, I walked straight up to it, picked it up, and carried it toward the hallway outside of the restaurant. The thing seemed a little heavier than I remembered, and it definitely looked creepier in the dark. But after the shift was over, I sat the mannequin back on its spot. The complaints continued as the days went by. One man asked me if he could sit somewhere else because it was creepy to sit next to the mannequin. And another woman threatened to leave a bad review about it because, according to her, we should be more conscious of our type of decor. I agreed that the mannequin was unnecessary and kind of a hassle to deal with. But the pictures the owner wanted and the administrator overseeing the whole thing and basically doing exactly what the owner asked for, we had no choice. My girlfriend definitely didn't like it. She thought it was creepy and refused to touch it. But one night, we were forced to remove it for good. I was by the cash register getting change for one of the other waiters. There were 2 others on the floor, when suddenly 2 women screamed. And then another man got up and screamed to point at something at the window. We had about 5 tables at the time. The women who screamed hadn't even placed an order yet. The sudden scream turned into nervous laughter as I started walking up toward the women, one of them holding her palm against her chest like when you want to hear your own heartbeat. They pointed at the mannequin as both of their faces turned to ice-cold fear, and they let out shrieks. From one corner of the restaurant, I heard a, we saw it," in plain English. It was like in a movie. I was standing there in the middle of the restaurant as people started getting up, screaming for me to look at the window. And that's when I noticed it. I wasn't supposed to be looking outside. All I had to do was to look at the reflection of the mannequin as it sat there, slowly turning its head to the left. I let out a scream in panic as I took a couple of steps back. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The kitchen staff started coming out to the dining area. The badness of the whole thing is something I'll never forget. People moved to my side of the wall and away from it. Some of the customers were laughing nervously. Still, not wanting to believe what had happened, I walked over to the still mannequin and picked it up, even heavier this time. I tried to not have a look at its face as I walked past everybody and out to the hallway that led to the bathrooms, and set it down right by the storage closet and ran back inside. Things settled down after that. We all kept talking about it all night, and for the following month we were there. We spoke of the many theories, from things like the mannequin being infested with rats or roaches that caused it to move, to heat from the candles twisting the plastic. But the theory that the administrator of the hotel and the restaurant's chef go with is that the owner had been involved in several ceremonies that could have caused it to come to life. They had witnessed other strange things in the hotel as well. Things involving placing other items in certain places at the request of the owner. That mannequin was moved to the storage area by the back of the hotel, where it sits in peace. The only people that see it now are the members of staff that have to visit the area for cleaning supplies or to check on the herb garden, as well as the curious customers who heard the story of that night and still ask to take pictures with it. One of the stories that we like to tell around the house and at family gatherings is one that my brother and I experienced back when we were young kids and had just moved into the house we still live in now. I was 8 years old and my brother was 10 when we moved into a 4-bedroom home. We each had our own room, and my dad used the extra room to store things in it, and it served as kind of an office. The thing I liked most about the place was the huge backyard that my parents one day promised would have a pool. but instead we settled for one that stood above ground until it got a hole in it and the water drained out. The bad parts about the house were that the place was made of creaky wood and it smelled like Grandma's house, like old couches. It always felt like I was in a movie, like the ones I had grown up watching about kids living out in Maine or something with basements and stuff. We used to play around a lot in there. We sat on a skateboard and pushed each other down the hall. We hung a rope down the stairs to the basement and we would use it instead of the actual steps. And we tried to make an igloo out of dirt and mud in the yard based on a thing they taught us in school about mud bricks. We laugh about it now, but I think our parents sort of gave up on trying to keep us still. Of course, things changed since then, but a scare that we got definitely had something to do with it. First, I need to tell you about my friend Nathan. He was my same age and lived across the street. I met him when we were waiting around by the popsicle stand outside of school. He came up to tell me about how he caught a Pokemon on the game he had just gotten. I found him pretty cool. He used to laugh at everything. Mom laughed with him too because when they met, he had a massive orange stain on his white shirt and his upper lip and cheeks were sticky with the orange and red syrup from the popsicle he had been eating. She invited us inside, hurrying Nathan to wash his face and to not touch anything with his dirty hands. Nathan hurried away without even asking where the bathroom was. As soon as he got back to us, he said he needed to go do something and ran to his house. Mom and I both saw him run across the street, open the door, and then close it again before running back to us. I thought it was weird, but Mom didn't think much of it. We hung out for a while, and I showed him my room as he talked non-stop about games and toys he wanted for his birthday. We then walked downstairs. He asked to see the backyard and casually said that it looked the same after the first glance. I was a little confused at first, but then I understood everything. Nathan knew the people who used to live here before. Mom was sitting outside on the porch with a magazine on her lap when Nathan said he had to go home as we walked through the front door. She asked him where he lived, even though we had seen it already, and he pointed right across the street and 2 houses to the right, to the bright white house with the neat lawn. Mom had met Nathan's mom already, and it was cool to have a new friend in the area. Maybe I wouldn't bother my brother as much to play with me. One Friday afternoon, my brother, Nathan, and I walked to my house after school. We had some stuff to eat in the fridge along with Mom's note on the door saying that we had to warm it up in the microwave for 3 minutes. Nathan told us that he'd be right back, and before we could tell him that he could eat with us, he took off running to his house, and we saw him as he opened his front door, closed it, and came right back, catching his breath. It was getting dark, the sky was turning orange, and it was right at that point where we were supposed to turn on the lights. So Nathan got up from the couch to flick on the light switch. But as soon as he reached it, by the entrance to the hall, he let out a loud gasp. My brother and I got up to look down the hall, but there was nothing there. Nathan kept his look fixed all the way to the end, to the glass door that led to the backyard. I followed his eyes as I spotted a tiny, dark figure through the reflection of the glass crawling up the tree on the corner of our backyard. Not a smooth climb like from a squirrel or a cat, but more of a struggling climb, jumping up toward the lowest branch before kicking toward the trunk, trying to get up higher. I told my brother about it, and he didn't see it in time. Nathan took a few steps down the hall, almost like in a trance. I asked him what that was, but he didn't hear me. He instead took another step forward. We all became startled with the sound of the front door opening, and then my dad called my name. I yelled at Dad to come to us. Nathan turned around to look at us and then said hi to my dad and walked back to the living room to get his backpack. Then, without saying a word, He walked toward the front door. "Hey, Nathan, I didn't know you had a little sister," Mom said, as she struggled with 2 plastic bags of groceries in her hand. "I don't have a sister," he said. "I gotta go." And then he left. "Nathan doesn't have a sister, Mom," I said. My brother had gone upstairs by this point. Dad, who was still standing there by me in the hallway waiting for me to explain the backyard thing, looked right at Mom, as if they had something to say, but neither of them dared to begin. "Wait, then who was the girl behind the post by our front door?" Dad blurted out, finally. We all just sort of looked at each other. What girl was he talking about? We all had our theories about what my parents had seen. They said that when they were pulling up the driveway, they clearly saw a young, dark-haired girl trying to hide with her feet together, right behind a post on her front porch, peeking out at the headlights and then hiding her face again. They finished parking and they expected to see her around the porch. There was nobody there. At the time, I couldn't even imagine that the thing we had seen in the backyard and the girl hiding behind the post were related. But one day I overheard Mom tell Dad about a conversation she had with Nathan's mom. The family that lived in our house before we moved in had gone through a tragic accident in the house, and their only daughter had died. Nathan was told that the family simply moved away, but that his friend would write to him. I don't know who thought that lying to a little boy like that was a good idea. Nathan was 7 years old when she moved away without saying bye, and he checked behind the door for any mail that would be slipped through the slot on their front door. Nathan and his friend used to play tag all around our yard, but from what his mom said later on, their favorite game was always hide and seek.